the hell is interrupting my kung fu?
Radio Freesmith episode 296. Doing another compilation sort of episode featuring 3 different bands' demos. Because why not? It seemed to go over well the other times I did it.
There are at least a dozen doppelgangers and stooges out there.
And to keep the triple D
This is Diners, Drive-Ins, and
theme going, might as well call this one Dank Demo's Dritter Teil. Although truth be told, I've just about reached my limit of languages that I know how to count to 10 in that have numbers that start with D.
Idiote, analfabete, mongoloide.
This time around, it's all death metal again. First band I've seen touted in
various places
as being some sort of early sort of proto-slam death pioneer. Is that the case?
Let's find out.
Damonacy, a glorified crew from New Jersey, who put out one demo, 1 7-inch at the dawn of the 90s, and then vanished, most likely due to the death of their guitarist, who I'm assuming was the main songwriter. For 1992-1993, this is some pretty
Strange stuff.
It certainly has a potent amount of groove to it that you might expect from a band designated proto-slam, but it's also rather doomy and quite filthy sounding. Dissonant, not a standard sort of death metal sound at all. It makes sense that this particular song would be released on a Moribund Records compilation. I mean, we're talking about the same label that signed Infester, and I'm sure had these guys managed to get a full-length album out, it would have fit right in on that roster next to Infester, and it probably would have been some sort of widely acknowledged death metal classic. I gotta say, I like Damonacy a lot. Their grooves don't slam so much as they shamble or ooze. Truly filthy, disgusting sounding stuff. Are they some sort of proto-slam band? Well, if you ask me,
No, not really, no.
they are, in fact, something possibly even more interesting. Not that there's anything wrong with slam, I mean, I'm assuming you heard that sloppy mouth sucking I gave Repudiation last week.
How embarrassing.
But what makes these guys cool is I see them as being a pretty obvious stylistic follow-up to a band I covered a little while ago. That being Ripping Corpse from episode 243. On that episode, you might remember I was like, man, I wish there were more bands that sounded like this. Well, guess what? Now we got one. I wasn't expecting to find it because I went into this thinking it was going to be some kind of early slam, maybe internal bleeding-esque thing. And now I'm sort of vaguely remembering, I think somebody mentioned Damonacy in the comments on the Ripping Corpse episode. I never got around to actually checking them out until now.
I'm so sorry.
I wish I heard them earlier because they're great. They sounded a whole lot like Ripping Corpse. I mean, both bands lived about 15 minutes from each other in New Jersey. And Ripping Corpse was definitely the biggest band of the time from that region as far as death metal goes. Given that the signature Ripping Corpse style is so underrepresented in death metal, it's cool to see another band kind of picking up on it and running with it. The Ripping Corpse influences are probably most noticeable on Damonacy's demo. Which of course features an Evil Dead 2 sample, because why not? And I can see why some people might think this was sort of proto-slam-ish, because Ripping Corpse was a pretty major influence on Suffocation, who of course pretty much invented the slam thing. One major idea that Damonacy kind of ran with from Ripping Corpse was the idea of this really warped lead guitar. In fact, I gotta say, this guy sounds even stranger than Eric Rutan did on Dreaming with the Dead. And much like Ripping Corpse, there's songs of a whole bunch of different weird, complicated sections to them. Ripping Corpse influence pretty obvious in this riff right here. Even their guitar tone sounds very similar. Those vocals, man, nasty stuff. In fact, that was the second thing that really stuck out to me when I first heard these guys, apart from the fact that they sounded like Ripping Corpse. How great the vocals were. Very unique sounding. If I was going to be a death metal sommelier, I'd say I hear notes of Thomas Lindbergh from At the Gates, maybe a little bit of Deceased, a little bit of Obituary, but generally just kind of doing his own weird, shrieky thing. Whatever you call it, I like it a lot. And I'm not saying they sound like Ripping Corpse to diminish their musical contribution to death metal history, because one, Ripping Corpse is a pretty impossible band to copy compared to a band like Cannibal Corpse or Suffocation or Entombed. And two, yes, they are using Ripping Corpse as an influence, but especially by the time they get that 7-inch out, they've pretty much got their own weird death metal sound. I haven't really heard anything else in death metal that sounds like Damonacy's 1992 7-inch. This one's got 2 songs on it. They're both really long, they're both really complicated, and they both have a really warped atmosphere. They're really heavy on these extended instrumental sections and riff buildups, and the lead guitar and tremolo riffs that were already a standout on that demo are even more heavily utilized on their 7-inch. You got these shuddering sheets of bendy guitar sound, and these cool little transitional lead guitar bits linking everything together. A whole lot of Evil Waltz-like riffs, which were also a part of Ripping Corpse's canon, but taken to the next level here. And these absolutely monstrous slow sections. Again, they showed up in Ripping Corpse on songs like Rift of Hate, but here they're just a lot nastier and grosser sounding. And yeah, definitely a little bit slam adjacent, even if it's not really a proper brutal death metal slam itself. Really cool drum build up here too. Another big thing they expanded on from Ripping Corpse was having lyrics and vocal delivery structured in a sort of storytelling kind of way. It helps that the vocals here are a lot more understandable than is usual for the genre. But he also does a really good job of emphasizing the different story beats in a very narratively appropriate manner. Honestly, damn shame these guys didn't put anything out after this. Apparently the guitarist that died, John Egan, was also in the band Ritual Torment for a while, who later on turned into the band Gaffed. Who are also quite good. I'm gonna have to cover them someday. But that's about all we got from Damonacy. Really excellent stuff. Check out that demo and that 7-inch. Up next, we have a band from Canada, who I have seen described in
various places
as being a very early example of brutal death metal or even slam. Name of this band is Gorbage from Nova Scotia.
Holy fuck, Rakins! That's what those furry little bitches are, Julian. They're fucking me over, Rakins!
Do they slam? Well, they've certainly got grooves, but slams?
Me shall not think so.
Yet again, much like Damonacy, Gorbage, well, they might not be slam. They are doing something rather interesting, in that they are picking up the torch from another band that did heavily influence Suffocation, hence the slight overlap with slam compositional tendencies. In this case, we're talking about a band that I know you already own albums from them, because you bought them like a week after you got into death metal, and you don't like to talk about them anymore, because they're too mainstream, or I don't know, political reasons, whatever.
오야 진짜.
Yeah, you can't fool me. They're right next to your Nile albums. Talking about Napalm Death, but a very specific era of Napalm Death that was sort of an unresolved loose end within the death metal scene. Because Napalm Death, when they started out in the 80s, they got that grindcore thing going on. Then later, Napalm Death got that death grind thing happening. Then even after that, they, I don't know, try to turn into Machine Head or something, and then I don't even know what. I guess they play death grind again nowadays. But in between those two eras, there was one album named A Harmony Corruption. Didn't really sound like anything else. It wasn't grindcore, yet it wasn't really modern death grind either. It was some kind of weird, heavily punk-influenced death metal kind of thing. Probably my favorite Napalm Death album, but at the same time, it's sort of like a weird transitionary footnote in their overall arc as a band. And not too many people seem to have picked up on that style as a vector for extrapolation. At least I used to think that until I heard Gorbage, because these guys took that style and ran with it, did all kinds of crazy new things with it, and man, do they ever sound great. They're either fond of introducing riffs in a grindcore style like this one, and then immediately reinterpreting them in more of a groovy death metal style like you're hearing right here. Songwriting dynamics. And at least to my ears, and I'm sure yours if you're familiar with that era of Napalm Death, the Napalm Death influence is pretty obvious, but there are little suffocation-y bits that crop up from time to time, such as this entire trade-off solo section. Were you to put this section over a slightly slammier riff, you could probably convince me it was unreleased work from Hobbs and Cerrito. It certainly nails that effigy of the forgotten era suffocation soloing vibe, but the riffs underneath are total early 90s Napalm Death worship. Specifically, they remind me a lot of the kind of riffs that Mitch Harris, formerly of Defecation and Righteous Pigs, would write. Maybe I'll do an episode just on all the different Mitch Harris projects someday. Really groovy, rhythmically intense stuff. And here we go, grindcore version of that same groove riff from earlier. They're really good at switching back and forth between those two styles. Very dynamic songwriting, and of course that sets up that really fucking heavy groove riff from earlier very well. Speaking of which, Come on, my man even does the Barney Greenway. Arr! Like, this is totally influenced by Napalm Death. And it's influenced by a rather undernoticed era of Napalm Death that honestly did need some expansion. And that's why I'm glad Gorbage was around to take care of that problem. Just like I'm glad Damonacy was around to expand a Ripping Corpse. Given their grindcore proclivities, Gorbage also gets pretty bohemian with the songwriting. In addition to these groovy death metal epics, they also experiment a little bit with just straight up grindcore and even some doom metal, often combined in the same song. Such is the case with the rather doomy and crusty No Truth, which for me was a highlight of their third demo. I mean, check out that gnarly bass tone. What's not to love, dude? And if you're looking at the track run times, you might be a little bit confused because this song's only like 45 seconds long, and yet it's a doom song. Well, at least it is. Until it turns into a really noisy grindcore song right at the end. So that's what I mean by very bohemian, sort of cavalier approach to songwriting. Really experimental. And they got noticeably more experimental on their final demo from 1996 entitled Green Solution, which saw them going kind of prog death metal a bit. I mean, did you hear that weird dissonant fucking intro? That was strange. This EP is a little bit less grindy and a little bit more groove oriented, but still very much in line with their other material. It's just they got way better at their instruments this time around. Most notably in the bass department, where the guy starts dropping all this crazy Steve DiGiorgio shit, but also in the guitars, which utilize a lot of weird Voivod style hanging dissonant chords. And there's those groove riffs I enjoyed so much on the prior demo, back in full force. To kick your ass for buying that Dying Fetus album with Mark Wahlberg on the cover. You shouldn't have done that. That was a bad move. A good move would be to listen to this demo. I mean, you hearing that fucking bass playing? This whole demo sounds like if Napalm Death got really into Atheist or something, man. It's fucking sick. They actually have all 4 of their demos up for free on their Bandcamp. Friggin' search up Gorbage and you'll find them. Maybe someday they'll get a nice like reissue remaster type thing going for them. I mean, it finally happened with fucking Malediction. Why not?
Yeah, buddy.
So yeah, Gorbage great. However, we are still 0 for 2 on the Slam Death thing. Got one more band here, Ossuary from Pennsylvania. Specifically their 1994 demo entitled Fat. Apparently one of the first bands outside of the greater New York area to utilize slams. So does this band slam?
Yes, 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 yes. Yes.
Shit, yeah, they do. This is 100% old school, very groovy, brutal death metal from a time when not that many bands were playing that specific subgenre. Could be seen as ahead of its time, particularly with regard to its inclusion of absolutely disgusting, ignorant sounding slam riffs.
The enormity of their flat brain, the enormity of their stupidity is just overwhelming.
Which is absolutely fantastic. This shit almost sounds like something off a Jungle Rod album. With all that said, however, they are not a one-trick pony, and much like Gorbage, they actually also incorporate a decent amount of grindcore into the mix. I wouldn't even call it death grind. This is like straight up grindcore parts coexisting with groovy, brutal death metal riffs, and it's really well done. Check out this fucking Mortician riff right here. Straight up House by the Cemetery shit that then jumps right back into some absolutely savage grindcore, complete with double vocals, before finally reinventing that riff as more of a slam death thing. As far as I can tell, this band didn't do anything after this demo, and it's a damn shame, because man, they had a fucking style going here. Fucking absolutely putrid slam grind or something. I don't know what to call it. It's just really cool, really unique early brutal death metal. And like a lot of old school death metal bands, and unlike a lot of newer ones, these guys had a very distinctive style of lead guitar playing, which is definitely one of the highlights of this tape for me. All weird and atmospheric and floaty. Vocals are fantastic, as you're hearing right now, especially the highs, these long distended shrieks. Also like that bass tone a lot, really chunky, contrasts very nicely with the ultra buzzy lo-fi guitars. Somebody needs to remaster or reissue this pronto. They even work that awesome lead guitar into the slams, kind of winding its way around all of it. Not really something I've heard done with these kind of ultra chunky riffs before. And it even kind of does a little bit of a back and forth with the vocalist right here, sort of a trade-off thing.
How neat is that?
cannot recommend this demo enough if you like old school brutal death metal. And like I said, somebody needs to get on reissuing this, because all I've got is this really junky sounding tape rip, but it still does it for me. All three of the bands I played this week do it for me. It's all great old school death metal demos, and you should check out all of them if you get the chance. Damonacy, Gorbage, and Ossuary. It's all out there if you look for it. Anyways, thanks for listening or watching or whatever you did, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Shake the scene, you turkeys! Get out of my house! I'll see y'all tomorrow.